Okay, so let's get into it. Have you ever really thought about what's going on under the hood of your car? I mean, it's not just a big lump of metal, right? It's this incredibly complex system that's constantly talking to itself. Today, we're going to decode that secret language and take a look at the engine's nervous system. It's sensors.
We have all had that feeling, that sinking feeling when that little amber light pops up on the dashboard. But what is it actually trying to tell you? It's not just some random, hey, something's broken light. Oh no, it's way more specific than that.
And that right there is the key to understanding this whole thing. Your engine has a brain, and it relies on dozens of senses to do its job. So when that check engine light comes on, it usually means one of those senses is sending garbage data, and the brain is, well, it's confused.
And here it is, the brain itself, the Engine Control Unit, or ECU. This little computer is the true unsung hero of your car. It's processing this constant flood of information, making thousands of decisions every single minute to manage everything from your fuel to your spark plugs, all to make your ride smooth and efficient. But it's totally blind without its senses. So if you're the brain of an engine, what's the absolute first thing you have to know? You need to know about movement. You have to know where your most important parts are and exactly how fast they're spinning. This is the foundation. Everything else is built on this. If there's one MVP in the entire world of engine sensors, this is it. The crankshaft position sensor is basically the master pacemaker for the whole engine. Without the information it provides, the ECU has absolutely no idea what the engine's rhythm is. It's completely in the dark.
You know what's so cool about this is how simple and elegant the idea is. Just think of it like a clock. You've got this wheel with teeth on it spinning thousands of times a minute. The sensor just sits there and counts each tick as a tooth goes by. But here's the clever part, that one missing tooth. When the sensor sees that gap, it's like seeing the 12 on the clock face. It screams, aha, this is position 0. And that one reference point is all the ECU needs to time the spark and fuel for every single cylinder, perfectly.
And this just shows you how ridiculously important that one signal is. If the ECU's master clock just stops ticking, the engine might not even start. Or it could fire up and then die instantly because the brain has lost all sense of timing. We're not just talking about bad gas mileage here. If this one sensor fails, your engine is pretty much a paper.
Okay, so the ECU knows the engine's rhythm. It knows when it needs to inject fuel. So what's the next big question? Well, it's how much fuel. And to figure that out, it needs to know exactly how much air is being sucked into the engine.
This right here is the golden rule of making an engine run. It's all about that perfect mixture of air and fuel. You might hear engineers call it the stoichiometric ratio, but all it really means is getting the balance just right. Too much fuel, and you're wasting gas and creating pollution. Too little fuel, and you get terrible performance. It's all about that balance.
So how does the ECU measure the air part of that critical air-fuel mix? Well, it usually uses one of these two methods. A mass airflow, or MAF sensor, is kind of like, you know, when you lick your finger and stick it in the air to feel the wind? It's basically that, but super high-tech. It has a tiny wire that it keeps hot, and the more air that rushes past, the cooler that wire gets. The ECU reads that change to know the exact mass of air coming in. Now, the MAP sensor takes a different approach. It measures air pressure instead, figuring out how much air there is by the pressure it's creating. Two totally different paths to get to the exact same crucial piece of data.
All right, so the ECU knows the engine's speed and it knows how much air is coming in. You'd think that's enough, right? Nope. There's another huge variable that can throw all the math off: temperature. Let's see how this next group of sensors adds yet another layer of intelligence. So, the technology behind most of these temperature sensors is a really clever little thing called a thermistor. And the concept is actually pretty simple. It's a special material where, as it gets hotter or colder, the amount of electricity it lets through changes in a very predictable, very reliable way. The ECU just has to measure that resistance to get a super accurate temperature reading.
But why does the ECU even care about the temperature? Well, for two really big reasons. First, the coolant temp. A cold engine is a grumpy engine. Fuel just doesn't vaporize well, so the ECU deliberately adds extra fuel to keep it running smoothly. It's the modern version of pulling out the choke on an old carburetor. Second, the intake air temp. See, hot air is less dense. It's puffier. It has less oxygen in it than the same amount of cold air. The ECU has to know this so it can adjust the fuel to match. If one of these sensors goes bad, it could trick the ECU into thinking the engine is always cold, wasting tons of gas, or always hot, which would kill your performance.
Okay, this is where things get really smart. So far, all the sensors we've looked at are giving the ECU information before it acts. They're all inputs. But what happens after the bang? How does the ECU know if it made the right call? Well, that's where the feedback loop comes in.
This is the question that really separates a basic engine computer from a modern intelligent one. The ECU has taken in all the data, made its best educated guess, and kicked off a combustion event. Now, it needs to check its homework.
And this, my friends, is the tool it uses to grade its own performance. The oxygen sensor, or O2 sensor. It's just a brilliant piece of engineering that sits in your exhaust pipe and gives the ECU a literal report card on the fire that just happened.
So how does this report card work? The O2 sensor is basically a professional exhaust sniffer. It measures how much unburned oxygen is left over after combustion. If it sniffs a lot of oxygen, it tells the ECU, hey, that mix was lean, you didn't add enough fuel. If it finds almost no oxygen, it reports back that the mix was rich, too much fuel. And here's the amazing part. The ECU uses that grade to make a tiny adjustment on the very next fuel injection just milliseconds later. It's a constant, self-correcting conversation to keep the engine perfectly tuned.
But there's one more feedback sensor that's absolutely critical, and this one is purely a bodyguard. The NOx sensor acts like a tiny microphone that's bolted right to the engine block, and it's listening for one very specific and very dangerous sound.
Engine knock is bad news. It's when the fuel and air mixture explodes violently instead of burning in a smooth, controlled way. It creates this horrible shockwave that can physically destroy pistons. The NOx sensor is basically a microphone that is precisely tuned to hear the unique frequency of that destructive ping. The second it hears it, it screams at the ECU to immediately pull back the timing to stop the knock and save the engine from tearing itself apart. It is the engine's last line of defense.
And really, that's the whole picture. You've got position, air, temperature, and this constant feedback. It's this incredible symphony of dozens of senses all feeding data to one central brain. They all work together thousands of times a minute, totally invisible to us, just to make a simple drive to the store feel completely effortless.
So the next time that check engine light comes on, you'll know what's happening. It's not just a random error. It's a very specific message coming from a very complex nervous system. But it really makes you wonder about the future, doesn't it? As we start to trade engines for batteries and motors, what new invisible world of sensors will they need? What will be their secret language?